"Sir, you'll need to step aside. This line is for clients only." Those were the words that stopped Marcus Bryant in his tracks. Wearing a hoodie, jeans, and sneakers on a casual Friday, he looked like any other man walking into the downtown branch of Seabrook National Bank. But what the teller saw wasn't just his outfit, it was the color of his skin. The branch was quiet. Only a few people in line. Yet the moment Marcus approached the counter, teller Jenna Whitmore's posture shifted. Her eyes narrowed. She tapped her keyboard with visible suspicion. She didn't ask how she could help. She asked why he was there. And when Marcus calmly said, "I'm here to discuss my business account," she smirked and responded, "Do you even have a business account here?" Everyone in the room went silent. What she said next, she'd soon come to regret. Marcus Bryant had learned early on that the world rarely gave second chances to people who looked like him. He grew up in a run-down apartment complex on the east side of Baltimore, where sirens lulled you to sleep more often than lullabies. His mother, Denise, worked 2 jobs, overnight at the hospital as a janitor and during the day at a neighborhood diner, just to keep the lights on and food on the table. They didn't have much, but they had each other. And his mother had one rule: they can doubt you, but don't you ever doubt yourself. Marcus took those words to heart. In high school, he was labeled unfocused by teachers who never bothered to learn his name. He'd get followed around in stores, watched like a hawk while classmates roamed freely. His guidance counselor once told him, "Maybe college isn't your path. Have you considered a trade?" He didn't argue. He just worked. Late nights studying at the library. Weekends teaching himself code on borrowed computers. Summers spent building websites for local shops for barely any money, just enough to prove he could do it. By the time he got into college on a partial scholarship, he was already miles ahead of his peers in programming skills. After graduation, he took a job at a mid-sized tech company, but it didn't take long before he noticed the pattern. His ideas were praised only when someone else presented them. Meetings were filled with sideways glances. Colleagues joked about how articulate he was. So he left and started his own company. Bryant Tech Solutions began in the corner of his 1-bedroom apartment with a hand-me-down laptop and a whiteboard he picked up from a yard sale. It wasn't glamorous, but it was his. Within 5 years, he landed contracts with 3 major logistics firms. By year 7, the company had grown into a multimillion-dollar operation with clients in 6 states and a team of 40 employees. Marcus went from being underestimated to being undeniable. And yet, despite all of that, he knew that to the world, he still looked like a question mark. That's why, when he walked into the Seabrook National Bank that morning, wearing a hoodie, jeans, and a pair of clean sneakers, he wasn't surprised when the teller didn't smile. He had a meeting with the regional manager, David Carlisle. The purpose? To finalize the onboarding of his company's financial accounts, valued at over $22 million. It was the biggest shift Seabrook's downtown branch had seen in years. There had been congratulatory emails, a welcome package, even catered lunch waiting upstairs. But the moment he stepped inside, the energy shifted. The woman behind the counter, Jenna Whitmore, eyed him like he didn't belong. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but she didn't greet him like she had the customer before him. Instead, she said sharply, "Sir, this line is for clients only." Marcus paused. "I am a client," he said calmly. She tilted her head, clearly skeptical. "Do you have an account here?" "Yes," he replied. "My company just moved our corporate assets here. I have a meeting with your manager." She blinked, then smirked. "Do you have identification?" He pulled out his wallet and handed over both his driver's license and a sleek black business card that read, "Marcus Bryant, founder and CEO, Bryant Tech Solutions." Jenna glanced at it and shrugged. "Never heard of it." Marcus didn't flinch. He was used to this, people mistaking confidence for arrogance, success for suspicion. He knew exactly what was happening. It wasn't about a missing suit or not announcing himself with a briefcase in hand. It was about something much deeper, much uglier. It was about the assumptions baked into the way people looked at him, and what they chose to see. In that moment, Jenna didn't see a businessman. She saw a threat. Someone to question. Someone to challenge. What she didn't realize was that this man, this quiet, composed black man in casual clothes, was about to expose her bias in a way she'd never forget. And Marcus, he wasn't angry. He was ready. Because this wasn't the first time someone underestimated him. But it might be the last time she made that mistake. Jenna Whitmore wasn't new to the job. She'd been working at Seabrook National Bank's downtown branch for 3 years and had built a reputation among her coworkers. She was always punctual, impeccably dressed, and often corrected others on banking protocols, even when no one asked. She liked rules. Rules were black and white. Simple. She also prided herself on being, as she often said, firm but fair. But that Friday morning, something about the man standing at her counter rubbed her the wrong way. Maybe it was the hoodie. Or the casual way he leaned against the counter, calm, unbothered. Or maybe it was something deeper, something Jenna couldn't quite articulate. A subtle discomfort that tightened her posture and sharpened her voice without her realizing why. She didn't know who Marcus Bryant was. And at that moment, she didn't care. He didn't look like someone who belonged in a bank to her. Not one dressed like that, not one walking in like he owned the place. So, when Marcus politely said he was there to discuss his business account, Jenna's default response wasn't curiosity, it was suspicion. "You can't just walk in off the street and claim to have a business account," she said, her voice tinged with condescension. Loud enough that the elderly woman 2 places back in line looked up. "Do you have ID? Proof? Anything?" There was no hello. No offer of assistance. Just an interrogation wrapped in customer service language. Marcus didn't react. He'd seen this dance before. The guarded tone. The sudden shift from friendly to skeptical. The glance that lingered a second too long, scanning him as if searching for a flaw to confirm a quiet prejudice. He slowly reached into his pocket and handed her his driver's license, followed by a sleek matte black business card. The card was simple, clean, just his name, title, and the company logo. Marcus Bryant. Founder and CEO. Bryant Tech Solutions. Jenna took both without saying a word. She scanned the ID, glanced at the card, then looked up. "Bryant Tech," she said, her lip curling slightly. "Never heard of it." The way she said it wasn't casual. It was dismissive. As if the value of a company depended on her recognition of it. As if her ignorance was a measure of someone else's importance. She tapped a few keys on her screen, not really searching, just going through the motions. Her body language radiated doubt, her eyes narrowing just slightly, the corners of her mouth twitching downward. But Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't rush to explain or rattle off numbers. He didn't defend himself or raise his voice. Instead, he did something Jenna didn't expect. He smiled. It wasn't a sarcastic smile. It wasn't angry or mocking. It was calm, controlled, almost knowing. That smile unnerved her more than if he'd snapped back. To Jenna, that smile didn't make sense. In her mind, people who were challenged got defensive. People who didn't belong got angry or embarrassed. People who pretended got flustered. But Marcus, he just stood there, quiet, composed, eyes steady. That smile said, "You've already made a mistake, you just don't know it yet." And deep down, something flickered inside Jenna. A flicker she refused to acknowledge. Unconscious bias was never something she believed applied to her. She read the HR pamphlets, attended the seminars, checked the boxes. She had friends of color, after all. She'd even shared an Instagram post last year during Black History Month. But in this moment, face to face with a confident black man who didn't fit the mold she expected, she realized she had already judged him. Not because of anything he said. Not because of what he did. But because of who he was and how he looked. Still, Jenna wasn't ready to admit any of that. Instead, she doubled down. "I don't see your company listed in our system," she said curtly. "Are you sure you're at the right branch?" Before Marcus could respond, something unexpected happened. The glass doors of the bank opened, and a sharply dressed man in a navy suit came walking out from the side hallway, eyes scanning the room until they landed on Marcus. "Mr. Bryant. So sorry to keep you waiting," said David Carlisle, the regional manager. Jenna's breath hitched. David crossed the room quickly and extended a hand. "We've got everything set up in the conference room. Do you need anything, coffee, tea?" Marcus shook his hand, still smiling. Jenna stood frozen, still holding his ID and business card. David glanced at her, confused. "Jenna, didn't you recognize Mr. Bryant? He's the CEO of Bryant Tech. We just moved their corporate accounts over last week. They're our largest client in the region." Silence fell across the lobby. And in that silence, Jenna finally understood. It wasn't just her mistake. It was a moment that revealed something far more uncomfortable. Her smile was gone. And Marcus? He didn't need to say a word. Marcus took a breath and quietly pulled his phone from his pocket. There was no anger in his expression. No flinch, no frustration. Just a controlled, practiced calm, the kind of calm you learn when you've had to navigate the world with dignity in the face of disrespect. He dialed a number and waited as it rang. Jenna stood across from him, arms crossed, still clutching his ID and business card like they were counterfeit bills. "Yes, Lisa," Marcus said smoothly. "Could you let David know I'm at the front counter? There seems to be a little confusion." He paused for a moment, then gave a polite nod. "Thanks." Jenna raised an eyebrow. "David who?" Marcus didn't respond. He simply put his phone away, stepped back, and waited. She scoffed under her breath. To her, it was a performance. Some kind of act. She was convinced he had exaggerated everything. In her mind, he was probably someone with a minor business checking account trying to get attention. But what happened next would shatter that illusion. Fast. Less than a minute later, the side office door near the back of the lobby opened with urgency. Out walked David Carlisle, the regional manager of Seabrook National. He was in his mid-40s, dressed in a tailored navy suit, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor as he scanned the room. The moment his eyes landed on Marcus, his face lit up with recognition. "Mr. Bryant," David called out, striding over with outstretched hands. "I'm so sorry to keep you waiting. We've been getting the conference room set up and, did the breakfast we sent over arrive to your office?" Jenna's face went completely blank. David reached Marcus and shook his hand with the warmth and familiarity of an old friend. Firm grip, full eye contact, a mutual respect. And then, David turned to her. Still holding Marcus's ID and card, Jenna looked like someone caught standing in the middle of a train track with headlights blinding her. "Jenna," David said, keeping his tone professional but sharp, "you didn't recognize Mr. Bryant?" Jenna swallowed hard. David continued, "He's the CEO of Bryant Tech Solutions, the firm that just transferred their entire corporate portfolio here last week. Over $22 million in assets." He gave a slight, pointed pause. "The biggest account this branch has ever handled." A hush fell over the entire lobby. Even the security guard near the door turned his head. Jenna slowly glanced down at the card in her hand. The same one she had dismissed minutes ago. The one she assumed was fake, or unimportant. She had looked at that name, that title, and still saw nothing. But now, with David's words ringing in her ears, the weight of her mistake came crashing down on her like a wave. Marcus didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His calm smile had already said it all. Jenna's cheeks flushed red. Her arms slowly fell to her sides. She handed back Marcus's ID and card with trembling fingers, not quite able to meet his eyes. She wanted to speak, maybe apologize, maybe explain, but no words came. What was she supposed to say? "Sorry, I assumed you were lying. Sorry I judged you by your hoodie and the color of your skin." It all felt too late. David, trying to smooth over the tension, gestured toward the hallway. "The room's ready whenever you are, Mr. Bryant." Marcus gave a polite nod, pocketed his ID and business card, and walked past the teller without a single glance back. And Jenna? She stood there frozen, still absorbing what just happened. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a moment of exposure. Her assumption had been publicly proven wrong, her bias laid bare not just to Marcus, but to the entire staff and every customer in that lobby. The man she had doubted was a power player. The man she treated like a trespasser was the very reason the branch was about to hit record growth that quarter. In under 5 minutes, Jenna had gone from gatekeeper to cautionary tale. And as Marcus disappeared down the hallway with David Carlisle, laughing softly about something only executives tend to find funny, Jenna realized she had just fumbled something far more valuable than a customer. She had fumbled her integrity. And he had risen above it all with grace. The meeting with David Carlisle went on exactly as scheduled. Contracts were reviewed, account logistics confirmed, and introductions made with the bank's private account management team. A catered breakfast tray sat untouched in the corner of the conference room, fresh bagels, fruit, and gourmet coffee, all courtesy of Seabrook National Bank. No one mentioned what had happened in the lobby. And Marcus, he didn't bring it up. He didn't need to. Professionalism had been his shield his entire life. And in moments like these, silence had a weight of its own, one that echoed louder than words. But outside the glass walls of the conference room, whispers had already begun. Tellers murmured among themselves. The assistant manager repeatedly peeked into the room with nervous glances. Even the janitor who came by to tidy the customer seating area seemed to linger longer than usual, pretending to wipe an already clean table. By the time Marcus left the bank that afternoon, the story had traveled from the front counter to the back offices and all the way up to corporate. Not just what happened, but how calm, how composed, how gracious he had been about it. Jenna, on the other hand, sat in a small HR office just past the break room, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Across from her sat Patricia Fields, the branch's human resources liaison, with a printed incident summary in her hand and a look of weary disappointment on her face. "This isn't a firing conversation, Jenna," Patricia began, "but it is a serious one." Jenna stayed quiet. She had already replayed the moment 100 times in her head, her sharp tone, the skeptical glance, the dismissive comment about his company. It all felt so routine in the moment. But now it burned with embarrassment. "You made assumptions," Patricia continued, carefully. "And the consequences of those assumptions could have cost us not only a major client, but our reputation." Jenna nodded stiffly. "You'll be removed from front desk responsibilities until further notice," Patricia said. "And you'll be enrolled in mandatory diversity and sensitivity training, 6 sessions over the next 3 weeks." Jenna bit the inside of her cheek, but said nothing. Back at home that evening, Marcus sat on his balcony overlooking the skyline, a cup of tea in one hand and his phone in the other. The city lights flickered in the distance, the hum of traffic below sounding strangely distant. His phone buzzed. It was a number he didn't recognize. Corporate line, probably. He answered. "Mr. Bryant, this is Lillian Harper, Vice President of Client Relations at Seabrook National. I'm calling on behalf of the executive team." Marcus said nothing. He just listened. We deeply regret what happened today. It doesn't reflect our values, nor the standards we hold for our employees. Please accept our sincerest apologies." Her voice was polished and respectful, but underneath it, Marcus could hear something else, concern. Damage control. Not just for him, but for what this situation could become if it went public. Marcus thanked her for the call. He meant it. But as he hung up, a quiet thought settled in the back of his mind. This wasn't rare. This wasn't the first time someone like him had been second-guessed, questioned, or made to prove they belonged. This wasn't about one teller at one branch. It was about the thousands of little moments that never made headlines. Moments where character was questioned before credentials. Where assumptions outweighed facts. Where appearance determined treatment. The difference this time, they judged the wrong man. A man who had the influence, the visibility, and the platform to shine a light on what happened. But what haunted Marcus more than the incident itself was wondering how many others faced the same treatment but didn't have the title of CEO to shield them. What if it had been a younger version of himself, fresh out of college, dressed the same way, holding the same card? Would that person have been believed? Would they have even been given a chance? As Marcus looked out into the night, he thought about that kid from East Baltimore who used to fix broken laptops for neighborhood teens. Who used to get stared at in stores. Who was told, "Maybe college isn't for you." He smiled, not out of joy, but resolve. Because while the meeting had gone on without a hitch, something far more important had been exposed that day. And Marcus knew, the real meeting hadn't happened in that conference room. It had happened at the front desk, where bias met its mirror. Marcus could have easily walked away from the entire situation with a sense of quiet victory. He had every reason to pull his accounts from Seabrook National Bank, to call out the institution online, to demand a public apology. The story had already made its way through the branch and up to corporate. He had the leverage. He had the attention. He had the power. But Marcus had never been the kind of man to choose retribution over reflection. Instead, he did something that no one expected. 2 days later, he sat at his desk, looked straight into the camera, and recorded a video. He didn't name the bank. He didn't mention the teller. And he didn't raise his voice once. He simply told the story, honestly, calmly, and with the grace of someone who knew that this wasn't just his experience. It was a reflection of something bigger. This isn't about one teller or one bank, he began. It's about something we see every day, something that's hard to name but impossible to ignore. He paused. I walked into a bank dressed in casual clothes. I wasn't loud. I wasn't aggressive. I was polite. And still, I was treated like I didn't belong, like I was lying about who I was, like I had to prove I was worth helping. He leaned forward slightly. This is what happens when people judge character based on clothing, or skin color, or what they expect a professional to look like. But success doesn't come in one shape. Intelligence doesn't come in one color. And leadership doesn't wear a uniform. He looked down, gathering his thoughts. I was judged before I said a word. And I know I'm not alone. He ended the video there. No hashtags. No angry rants. No viral gimmicks. Just truth. He posted it to LinkedIn with a caption. What does professionalism really look like? Let's talk. Within 12 hours, the video had 250,000 views. By the next morning, it had crossed 1 million. By the end of the week, it had surpassed 3 million views and had been reposted across Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. The comment section became a living testimony. Hundreds, then thousands, of professionals from every background began sharing their own stories. A Latina engineer followed in stores after work. A Sikh doctor mistaken for hospital staff. A young black woman in finance questioned by security every morning until she wore a blazer. The post had hit a nerve, not because it was loud, but because it was real. News outlets began covering the story, even without the name of the bank. Editorials were written about implicit bias in customer service. Panels were hosted on workplace diversity and first impressions. And quietly, behind the scenes, institutions began reviewing their practices. Seabrook National took note. A week later, Marcus received an email from the VP of Corporate Inclusion asking if he'd be willing to consult on a new company-wide initiative focused on training, recruitment, and equity. He agreed, but only on one condition, that the program be mandatory, not optional. They accepted. He wasn't doing it for the teller. He wasn't doing it for image control. He was doing it because he understood something many people still refuse to acknowledge. Change doesn't happen because someone gets called out. Change happens when someone calls attention to what's beneath the surface. A month passed. And then, unexpectedly, an envelope arrived at Marcus's office. It was handwritten. The return address revealed who it was from: Jenna Whitmore. Inside was a single page. She didn't try to explain what happened that day. She didn't defend her actions or sugarcoat her words. She simply apologized. I've replayed that moment so many times, she wrote. I thought I was being professional. I thought I was being cautious. But really, I was being small. You didn't deserve that. No one does. I've spent the past few weeks rethinking a lot of things, about myself, about what I was taught to see, and what I failed to question. I'm sorry, not just for what I said, but for what it revealed about how I see the world. I'm working on changing that. For real. Marcus read it once, then again. He didn't share it publicly. He didn't respond. He simply placed the letter in a drawer in his desk. Not out of spite, but as a reminder. A reminder that respect should never be a privilege. It should never depend on a name, a title, or an outfit. It should be a right, given freely to everyone the moment they walk through the door. Always remember, judging someone by how they look might cost you more than just your dignity. It could cost you your future.